Sharkie Game here. So today we're taking a look at the Final Fantasy X-2 Tiny B controller for the PlayStation 2. Now before we get into the unboxing and review of this controller, I just wanted to take a moment to thank all you guys for subscribing, as I've now reached 300 subscribers. Now I know that number doesn't seem high to most of you guys, but to me it's awesome, so thanks for all your support, guys. Of course, if you haven't subscribed already and you're watching this, then feel free to do so. I'll have heaps more controller and accessory videos up very shortly. Okay, so now into the review of this awesome controller in front of us. So this is the Final Fantasy X-2 Tiny B controller for the PlayStation 2. It's made by Hori, and it's basically a DualShock 2 controller incorporated into two guns that form like a replica of Yuna's guns from the Final Fantasy universe. So the guns she's basically holding in the picture just there. So this is the front of the box, and the box is pretty massive actually. It's this glossy kind of red color. I don't know if you can see how it shines sort of in the light there. At the top it's got Final Fantasy X2. Further down it's got some writing and stuff like that. It says PlayStation 2, with the PlayStation logo, and of course it shows Yuna in like a pose holding her guns. It's pretty cool looking. On the side of the box, it's just plain sort of red. It's got kind of a sketch, like an outline of the guns. You've got the PlayStation logo, and of course it says Final Fantasy X2, PlayStation 2, and Hori. Now the bottom is pretty much the same. Same with the other side. And that's the top of the box. Moving on to the back of the box, it basically says Tiny B, DualShock 2 there, and of course Final Fantasy X2. It shows a bit of a shot here, which I'll go back in a bit, see if you can see that. It basically just points out exactly what button does what, where is it located on the gun, etc. Also shows a picture here of the two guns in their stand, which this comes with, so you can display them when you're not actually using them. And it's got another cool picture of Yuna there, posing with, of course, her guns again. It's looking pretty cool. And the rest of it is just sort of company information and a bit of warnings and everything. So, just general stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up this box and have a look inside. First up, in this little envelope that you got here, all it has is basically like a little warranty card thing. Just a general kind of Hori kind of warranty. Of course it's all in Japanese because it is a Japanese controller. Alright, so what I'm going to do, as there's quite a bit here to get out of their boxes, I'll pull them out and I'll point out what they are one by one, but then I will go into more details once I've unboxed everything. So I'll pull everything out first, and we'll go from there. So here is the first gun, so first look at the gun, and of course we'll get a bit more into it in a moment. Second gun. And of course this is a bit of an instruction manual that kind of points out exactly what is what on the actual gun. It's all in Japanese, as this is a Japanese controller. And it also shows you here what not to do with the gun. And some of these pictures are usually pretty entertaining, like, I'm assuming that's like not break things, don't point it at other people, don't drop it, looks like don't hit people with it, and don't give to babies. I'm guessing that's don't carry in your luggage when you're at the airport. So, yeah. Get more into the manual. we'll use that in a moment as well. Alright, so the next bits here, these are sort of just like, how would you even say it? It's more just for looks, just for display sort of purposes, to make them look like more closer to replica guns. Because Yuna's guns have this kind of decoration on it. I don't know if you can see there, it's got the kind of end piece. So each gun has this little piece here that actually clips on, so you've got clips there and clips in the back. And they just sort of clip on and give it a sort of look just like the Final Fantasy. And they also cover the controls at the back there, so it looks more like a kind of replica gun. And there's also one for the other one. So as you can see, it just sort of makes it look more like a replica gun. Okay, I'll just unbox this part here. Now this is basically the stand, because these come with a display stand, and the display stand is used so you can basically display them. And there's also the cable in here as well. So get the cardboard out of the way. And of course this is your cable that you connect the guns and connect your PlayStation with. And of course this is your stand. Now bear with me while I pull this out, because this is probably the biggest down point of this whole thing, is the stuff that the stand is made of. I'll show you why in a second. That's probably the first thing I'll cover in this review, actually. Okay, so this is everything that you get in the box. You get the stand, you get the two guns with the two little ornament pieces, and you get the cable and a manual, and it all is in this huge box just here. So basically what the stand is for is it's meant for display purposes, so that you can actually display this when you're not using the guns. So when you're not using the guns, you put it on display, and that way it's not being wasted or anything like that. So how the gun's displaying it is your first one will come here, sit in there, and the second one will mount just there. Just like that. So basically, I'll just come out a bit. This cable's out of the way. So basically, that is what it looks like. It looks pretty cool. You can see the Final Fantasy X-2, you can see Yuna's guns. It pretty much displays everything. So it looks pretty cool, right? Exactly. The problem is, first off, we'll start with the stand, since it is sort of a cosmetic piece and they expect you to use them, is this stuff on top of the stand here. So this stuff is like a rubbery type of surface. Like when you get them originally, they're fine. I mean, you get them originally, you know, they're smooth and everything, but after a while, this stuff will go really sticky. Like, and I mean really, really sticky. Like, I don't even touch it right now because I know it's going to come off black stuff on my hands. That's pretty much how sticky it is. You could see on the plastic that I actually pulled it out of. There was actually stuff stuck on the plastic. That's from the stand. And you can see there's edges here where it's actually been a bit basically worn. I don't know if you can see that. You can see the edges there. You can see a big chunk has sort of come out in the center there. It's kind of unstuck and there's scratches, and it looks really yucky at the moment. That's the easiest way to put it. You can see it's got a lot of scrapes, a lot of things, dents and scrapes, and that's because the stuff really just slightest touch will scratch it. And yeah, the slightest little touch will scratch things and just do really crazy stuff at it. So the stand is terrible. I've even seen some instances where people will actually take like a sharp knife or a spatula or some kind of instrument and actually scrape the stuff off, so it's just the plastic underneath left. Because I mean, you can imagine putting this on the shelf. It's going to be a dust attractor. All this stuff is going to just stick with dust and dirt and grime and everything like that. So the stand, even though it's just cosmetic and a little extra they added for more display, they could have put different surface on it just to make it that little bit more better. I mean, if you're a collector and you want this displayed as a collector's item, you don't want something that's going to degrade over time. And it's not just my one that's like this, it's pretty much any Final Fantasy Tiny B controller that you buy, no matter how new or how old it is, it's eventually going to end up like this. So, if you're worried about that, it's a flaw in the way they designed this cosmetic extra. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, we'll move on to actual guns. Let's pull this forward. Okay, so I'll put these little display ornaments down. Actually, I'll show you what the guns look like with both of them on. So that's pretty much what the guns look like with the little ornaments on them. You can't actually use them as controllers with them on because they block the controls. So if you take them off, then they reveal the controls on the back. Okay, so you hold this gun in this hand and this gun in this hand. On the back, you can see on the right one, there's actually an analog stick, and it looks pretty close to like a GameCube analog stick. It's really kind of small. Yeah, nothing really fancy about it. It does click down as well. Don't know if you can hear that. The next button, of course, is your trigger, which is R1. Now, notably, the trigger is metal, while the rest of the gun is plastic, so that's pretty cool. Below the trigger, you've got a second button here, and on this right-hand gun, this is actually circle. So when you press that, that is actually circle. Now, you've got two buttons hidden on the side. It looks like there's actually four, but there's actually one there and one on the other side of the controller. This one, I believe, was square. Yeah, it's square, this one. And the other one is R2. And they all blank, so you have to kind of refer to the manual over there to see exactly which ones are which to begin with. Going over the rest of the gun, you've got some writing there, some design circles at the top. The rest of it is pretty plain. The handle looks pretty cool. It's got like a screw in it. It's a pretty thick handle as well. Looking at the front, it's just like an empty barrel there. I don't think you can see anything. There's nothing really you can see inside of it there, because this is not a light gun. And the bottom here, basically the button here, is just a start button. I think it's start. Basically the buttons on the bottom of the gun are start and select. I've forgotten which one's which now. But basically these ones here are your start and select buttons. And of course, moving to the bottom of the gun, you've got a little port here, and that's where the cable's going to plug in. So you've got this little cover to keep that safe while you're not using it. On to the next gun. On the top here, you've actually got a D-pad. Your trigger here is L1. Your button down here is X. It's pretty cool. The middle button here is triangle, and the other side is L2, I think. Yeah, L2. So that one on the other side is L2, and this one is triangle. And same thing with the other one. It's also got this little cover here where you can plug the cable into. And it's got the button there, of course, as well. Now, first off, and I'll get this away before we go into the actual cable part of it, this is not a light gun. They have taken a DualShock 2 controller and they've put it into two guns. Alright? So you don't aim like this, you're still using the controls, so it doesn't matter where you point the guns, it's not going to affect your gameplay because it's not a light gun. There's no motion sensing or anything in the gun itself. It's just a controller that they put in a gun form. Alright, so there's nothing really fancy, except it's a kind of Final Fantasy type replica of Yuna's guns. So moving on to the cable itself, first off you can see you've got an analog switch there, and you've got an L and R button. What is this, you ask? Well, when you plug this into your console, and you plug both of these into your guns, which I'll do right now, just to show you how that plugs in. The LR button basically is used as a switch to change what the stick does. So if the stick on the back of this gun here, whether it's the left stick or the right stick. So you can virtually use both your sticks, that would you normally use on a DualShock, but you've got to flip that switch if you want to use one or the other. So your cables just plug in just like that, and they fit in there pretty smooth. You can see the cables go out of the way. Now I'm not going to bother to unravel these. Okay, so that's how it's set up. So the other end there, that end there, you plug into your console, and these ones you have in your hands with the cable dangling out. Of course you would undo the little ties so you'd have more kind of room. That switch on there itself, you would change to left if you want this stick at the back here to be a left stick, or you'd put on R if you want that stick to be the right stick. So it depends which way you would like to go with that, because you could have either. The stick can be either left or right. It's really up to you. So that is just totally optional. You can hear the click in the trigger there. The buttons themselves are pretty straightforward. I mean, there's nothing fancy of them. And in fact, like, this basically takes us into the comfortability of this controller, which basically is non-existent. First off, when you have this as it is like this, these controllers are fairly heavy. They are not a light controller. So don't expect them to be after a little while you will start leaning them down like this and using it, because you're using it as a controller, not a light gun, remember? So you don't actually have to point it at the screen to work at you, so you could just lean it down on your desk or on your knees or wherever you're playing and just use the controls on the back as you would normally a controller. And of course you flip the switch when you want the stick to be the left or right, and of course that can be a pain. First off, I notice the cable, it does put a little bit extra weight on the actual controller. It does split it up so it doesn't feel as much, but there is a bit more weight from the cable than just the guns. The guns themselves also, like I said, give some weight, and that they got really huge handles. Alright, they're really bulky type guns. So if you've got smaller hands and you're holding this, it's probably not going to be the most comfortable thing you've been holding. Triggers are easy to fire. They are pretty responsive. I mean, they're not too bad to do it. Those buttons are pretty easy to press. They're not as loose as they probably should be, and you can't really hear too much of a click, so it's hard to know if you've pressed it further enough sometimes. But otherwise you can get to it. It's not too bad. The real bad one is trying to stretch your thumbs up to reach the D-pad and this analog stick, because the handles are so big, and the way you optimal hold the triggers, you feel like you should hold it like this. But to stretch your hands up, it is very uncomfortable. Even leaning with the things down here, it is a very uncomfortable controller to use. And that's not even mentioning going to these buttons down the side here, which, okay, your thumb can just get into that one, but to get to this one, you'd have to put your other finger off, so you'd have to lift it off the trigger to press that button. And it's pretty tight there because it's actually got that little hangover from the top sort of design piece. So it's making it really tight. And the same on the other side. To press it, you got to do that, or you can use your thumb to hit that one. But it's not very comfortable whatsoever. Some people last playing with about 15 minutes, and you know, they can get by. It's so hard. Like, if you love Final Fantasy and you love playing the game, absolutely love playing it, then you would be using a controller. I mean, the only reason you would buy one of these things is not to improve your Final Fantasy game, because it won't do that. They're not a good controller. They really are a novelty. They are a novelty. That's why they come with a display stand. Hori wants you to display them, because honestly, like most people that buy this, they're either going to pack it away as a collectible, or they're going to display it on their shelf. They're not going to use it as a controller, because it's uncomfortable. It's totally not ergonomic whatsoever, and it doesn't really serve any greater purpose than using a controller, because it is a controller, just in the shape of a gun. I mean, most people, when they get this first off, they may think, oh, this is pretty cool, let's try it out. And they try it out, and they are very disappointed about it, because it's really uncomfortable, and I've heard that it hurts some people's hands. It hasn't really hurt my hands, although I feel it when I stretch to get the sticks and the D-pad. It does, you do stretch your hands a bit to get there. But it hasn't really hurt my hands as such. Uncomfortable, yes, but not really pain. But I've heard some people say it's actually painful for them to use this thing. Maybe because they got small hands, or they got something that, bothers them, or the way they have to stretch their hands or something. But that's not very good if you have a controller that's actually painful for you. So, really, this controller, and this is why a lot of people buy them and then sell them like straight away, because they realize how bad it is. That's what it was like when it first came out. But believe it or not, this is pretty much a rare controller now. They are pretty hard to find. Sometimes you get spurts like on eBay or something that you'll get a whole lot of them come up at the same time. But in general, these are a rare controller. This is the red version here, and it's the Japanese version that comes with Final Fantasy X-2. There is like a silver boxed version, which is basically the international version, that I believe comes with Lost Missions or something like that as a bonus. I can't remember exactly, but it comes with like an extra kind of bonus something in it that it's a Lost Missions International version or something. That one you don't see that often. You see this red box version way often. So the international version tends to be a bit rarer, and people do tend to bid a bit higher for it. But in terms of the controller and the stand, it is identical. Same problem with the stand, same problem with the guns. It's just the box that's really different. That's really the only thing that's different. But yeah, so basically, this is not a very good controller. It's terrible. It's very uncomfortable. It looks cool. It does. I admit, it totally looks cool. They are Yuna's guns. They look pretty awesome. But functionality? No. Just don't use them. Don't do it to yourself. It'll be more like a torture challenge to see how long someone can torture themselves playing Final Fantasy while using these guns. And I've noticed that some combos and stuff that you want to pull off in Final Fantasy, you just can't do with these guns. The button layout, it's just impossible to do those kind of commands with it. It's just, you can't do it. You just can't do it. And I mean, really, with the triggers, you're maybe triggering this, but I mean, there are some times where you'll be holding certain buttons down or certain triggers down depending on what you're doing. So, yeah. It doesn't work very well. It really doesn't. So, the only people that really will have this and keep this in their collection or their game room is someone that is a Final Fantasy fan that wants to display them maybe on their shelf, and they just really a Final Fantasy or a Yuna fan, and you want to show your Final Fantasy fandom. The other person may be someone that a game that has a collection and wants it in their collection, and they may keep it in the box because a display stand is such a terrible material. But other than that, normal gamers will not have it. It's way too expensive for like a casual gamer or an average gamer to have this. So really, this is directly aimed at collectors. So if you like Final Fantasy and you want to collect this and have this in your collection, buy it for its collector's value, not for its usability. Because if you buy it for usability and you expect to get something really awesome like gun controller for Final Fantasy, then you are going to be very disappointed. So yeah, that's about all I can say about this one, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll have heaps more controller and accessory videos up very shortly, and I'll have probably some new stuff up in the next couple of weeks, so keep an eye out for that. And thanks again for subscribing, guys. Really appreciate you guys getting me to 300. That is really awesome. And like I said before, if you haven't subscribed already, don't forget to do so, as I'll have heaps more controller and accessory videos out very shortly. Thanks again for watching, guys.